The plane hummed steadily, high above the clouds, 30,000 feet up, yet a subtle tension hung in the cabin. The passengers chatting quietly, shuffling papers or scrolling through screens, unaware that the ordinary flight was about to turn extraordinary. The girl sat quietly in her window seat, hands folded on her lap, eyes scanning the sky beyond the small oval glass. She was 12, yet she had always been fascinated by machines and airplanes, the way levers and buttons controlled vast steel birds, and her mind instinctively catalogued every sound, every vibration as though predicting the movement of the aircraft itself. A sudden jolt shook the plane slightly, her fingers tightening around the armrests, the passengers murmuring in mild alarm. Yet the normal calm of the crew's movements offered comfort until she noticed a strange stillness in the cockpit. The usual hum of conversation from the pilots was absent, the intercom silent, the instruments glowing faintly yet nothing moving. To indicate the routine checks, she felt a chill run down her spine, a sense that something was not merely unusual but wrong in a way that demanded attention, yet no adult seemed to understand the danger. She glanced quickly at the flight attendants. Moving down the aisle, their faces pale. Their steps hurried, yet the calm professional composure fractured the hum of engines, masking the first threads of panic. The passengers began to whisper, noticing the silence from the cockpit, the weight of uncertainty pressing into every corner of the cabin. Her heart hammered instinctively. She stood slowly testing the space around her each footstep, deliberate as she considered what had to be done, knowing instinctively that if no one acted, the situation could escalate in seconds into disaster. The cockpit door loomed ahead, closed and seemingly ordinary, yet charged with suspense. She stepped forward cautiously, her hand brushing the handle cold metal under her fingers, her mind racing, calculating. What might be inside? The slumped silhouettes of the pilots visible through the small window made her stomach twist. She realized immediately that they were incapacitated, motionless, or struggling in ways she could not yet assess. Her pulse quickened. She knew instinctively she had to act now before the plane veered dangerously off course. She pressed gently against the door. It resisted slightly, her fingers curling around the handle, and then she pushed it open just enough to peer inside. The cockpit was dimly lit, instruments glowing softly, the yoke still centered yet no hands guiding it. The pilots slumped over their controls, a faint groan escaping one as consciousness flickered, and the girl froze in a moment of awe and fear, realizing she alone could take action to stabilize the plane. The suspense of the moment pressed into her chest, the cabin behind her, silent, waiting for what would happen next. Her small hands reached for the yoke, testing its movement, the plane responding, smoothly yet unpredictably, each tiny adjustment critical. She could see the altimeter fluctuating slightly, the artificial horizon tilting with the subtle gusts of wind, her mind cataloging the readings instinctively. She climbed carefully onto the co-pilot's seat, aware of the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. Each breath stretched taut, the suspense in the cockpit, thick as the passengers behind her craned their necks to see the unfolding scene. The plane shuddered slightly as a minor turbulence hit, and she reacted instantly, adjusting the yoke micro-movements, guiding the aircraft back to level. Her pulse raced, each adjustment precise yet instinctive, the thrill and terror coiling together into a focused clarity she had never known. The passengers watched silently, the suspense almost unbearable, as they realized a child was now controlling the enormous aircraft, with the pilots unable to intervene, the outcome resting entirely on her small hands and quick mind. A faint crackle from the intercom startled her. The voice of ground control issuing instructions, calm and deliberate, she repeated each aloud, confirming understanding, her voice steady, despite the racing of her heart. Each adjustment she made guided the plane toward stability. The passengers gripping armrests or holding hands, the suspense thick around them every second stretching into eternity. She glanced back briefly, seeing the mix of fear and awe reflected on the faces of the adults who could not fathom the calm precision of a 12-year-old guiding them through potential catastrophe. The pilots began to stir their movements slow and uncertain, blinking rapidly as consciousness returned. She kept her hands firm on the controls, micro-adjusting each movement, the plane responding almost magically to her touch. The cabin trembled slightly with minor shifts in air currents, the suspense tightening with every flicker of altitude, change every tremor in the fuselage. The girl's eyes flicked from instrument to horizon, her mind racing, calculating speed and pitch, each tiny movement, a negotiation with gravity and physics and instinct. A soft jolt ran through the plane, turbulence hitting more forcefully. This time she reacted, immediately adjusting yoke and throttle the plane, leveling smoothly. The passengers exhaling sharply, but holding their breath. The suspense now a living thing curling through the cabin like smoke. She realized that the pilots were awake enough to speak yet not coordinated enough to take over without risk. Every micro-adjustment. She made the difference between chaos and controlled flight. She adjusted the throttle slightly, the plane responding instantly, minor shifts in altitude corrected. With subtle precision, the cabin remained tense, silent, except for the hum of the engines and the occasional creak of the fuselage under pressure. Her mind cataloged every instrument, reading every gust of wind, every minor tremor, and she moved almost, instinctively reacting faster than thought, as if the plane itself were guiding her through the crisis, the suspense building higher with every heartbeat. The flight attendants whispered softly to passengers, encouraging calm, yet glancing back at her constantly, the awe in their eyes mingled with fear. Each minor adjustment she made brought the plane closer to steady the horizon, glimpsed through the windows, showing a sky gradually clearing, yet the final resolution uncertain. Her small hands on the yoke commanded a giant aircraft, and the suspense held every person in the cabin captive, waiting for the first sign of safety or disaster. Ground control crackled again, offering instructions for course correction. She followed each methodically, adjusting rudder and throttle as needed. The plane responded almost perfectly, the passengers gripping each other or silently watching her every movement, the suspense palpable, each second stretching longer than any moment of ordinary flight. The pilots, now fully alert, whispered guidance quietly, yet hesitant to interfere, disrupting the delicate balance she had maintained for minutes that felt like hours. A sudden bump rocked the plane slightly. She reacted instantly, micro-adjusting yoke, and throttled the aircraft, leveling perfectly again. The cabin exhaled silently, holding tension as the young passenger guided the flight with instinctive authority, the suspense now electric. Everyone aware that what had begun as routine travel had transformed into a test of courage, skill, and calm in the face of imminent danger. The girl glanced briefly at the horizon, and the slowly stabilizing instruments, a small flicker of relief mingled with awareness that the flight was far from over, and the next challenge could arrive at any moment. The plane hummed steadily under her hands, yet the subtle tremor of altitude shift kept her pulse racing. Her fingers moving carefully across yoke and throttle, as if every small adjustment was a negotiation with the air itself. The passengers leaned forward, their faces pale and taut eyes glued to the back of her head, as though they could feel the tension radiating from her small frame. The cabin was silent, except for the soft murmur of the engines and the faint whir of ventilation, yet each second stretched unbearably long, the suspense coiling like a living thing around them. She adjusted her seat slightly, testing the reach of each control, her mind cataloging every instrument, dial, and lever, like a map she had memorized over years of fascination. She knew the plane was stable, but only barely, and that any sudden movement or turbulence could throw it off course. She glanced at the slumped pilots, their bodies still twitching slightly as consciousness returned and her heart hammered. She could not rely on them yet. Every second she spent alone in control was a thread connecting life and disaster. A soft vibration from the control panel alerted her to a minor shift in altitude. She reacted instinctively. Tiny micro-adjustments, pushing forward then back, tilting slightly, the yoke correcting imperceptibly, the plane leveling almost magically as if it recognized the command. Her hands felt small on the giant controls, yet the response was precise, the hum of the engine steadying. Beneath her fingers, the passengers exhaled slightly, though they did not relax. Their bodies tensed, ready to spring at any sound, the suspense thicker than air itself. Ground control crackled faintly over the intercom, a voice rough and calm issuing instructions in a slow, deliberate cadence. She repeated each instruction aloud, confirming her understanding. Her small voice clear and precise in the enclosed space. The plane responded to her movements, each minor adjustment reinforcing the fragile stability she had created. Her pulse raced in tandem with every tiny shift in pitch or speed, the suspense rising with each second that passed without full resolution. The pilots began to stir more noticeably, one blinking rapidly, the other twitching. In a slow awakening, she kept her hands on the controls ready to react instantly, micro-adjustments guiding the plane through the slight variations in wind and turbulence. Each breath felt heavier than the last, the suspense mounting the passengers, frozen in place, watching silently, unable to intervene, yet aware that the fate of everyone aboard rested on the actions of a 12-year-old girl. A sudden jolt rocked the cabin slightly, a minor turbulence hitting the wings. She reacted immediately, the yoke shifting her tiny movements, precise and controlled. The plane leveled again almost imperceptibly, yet the tension in the air was palpable. The passengers gripping their armrests, holding breath, the suspense stretching taut as though the world had stopped waiting for the next instant. The girl's mind calculated instinctively the forces at play. The weight of the plane, the pull of gravity, the subtle shifts in air, each adjustment critical to maintaining balance. The hum of the engines seemed louder now, the low vibration in the floor amplifying every thought in her head. She glanced briefly at the instrument panel, the altimeter fluctuating slightly, the artificial horizon shifting minutely, every small correction deliberate her. Hands moving almost automatically, she could feel the line between control and chaos so thin it might vanish with the slightest misstep, and the suspense hung like a cloud over the cabin, every passenger aware of the fragile miracle unfolding ground. Control issued another sequence of commands, slow, deliberate, and methodical. She repeated them steadily, her fingers moving across throttle and yoke, the plane responding in kind. The pilots, now fully alert, watched in disbelief the precision with which she maintained stability, the suspense mounting as everyone realized she was not a child. Panicked but a calm center holding the aircraft steady against invisible forces. Each second stretching taut as a wire ready to snap. A sudden bump rolled. The plane slightly downward, she reacted instantly, micro-adjusting rudder and yoke, the plane leveling again almost seamlessly, yet the passengers gasped softly, some gripping each other, others frozen in awe, the suspense thick and electric. The girls' mind cataloged every vibration, every subtle change in speed, every shift of altitude. Her awareness expanded beyond ordinary perception. The entire cabin watching silently as tension coiled tighter with each passing heartbeat. The pilots finally spoke, softly guiding her through small handovers, subtle corrections they could now manage together. Yet she kept her hands poised, ready to intervene each minor adjustment, the difference between steady flight and disaster. The plane hummed steadily, yet Unpredictably, the suspense unbroken every second, a reminder of what had happened and what could still happen with the unseen currents and shifting weather threatening even now. And as the horizon stretched out beyond the windows, clouds parting into faint blue light, she realized that this flight was far from over. The suspense still thick, every movement critical, the tension palpable, every breath a reminder that the plane remained in balance by her decisions, her instinct and the quiet focus that refused to break for a single second. The turbulence increased slightly ahead, a subtle roll to the left. She reacted instantly, tilting the yoke, countering the shift, the plane stabilizing perfectly, the passengers gripping armrests, whispering. Softly, the suspense mounting with every second the horizon glimpsed through the windows, showing a clearing. Yet no one could predict what gusts or minor shifts would challenge them next. The pilots offered guidance cautiously, each small hand motion, a hint rather than a command, the girl following instinctively, micro-adjusting controls, maintaining perfect balance. The storm clouds on the horizon darkened ominously, lightning flickering faintly, a warning of conditions she had only simulated in video games yet never faced in reality. She leaned forward, hands firm on the yoke, each micro-movement correcting pitch and throttle the plane, responding almost magically. The passengers silent, their faces a mix of fear and awe, every second stretching, impossibly long with suspense at a breaking point. A sudden drop of altitude made her heart leap. She reacted immediately, correcting yoke and throttle minute adjustments, smoothing the plane as it leveled perfectly again. The passengers exhaled sharply, yet remained tense, the suspense like a living entity curling around the cabin. Her fingers danced across controls instinctively, her mind calculating every force, every fluctuation in airspeed and gravity, the pilots watching incredulously as their passenger navigated what could have been disaster with composure and precision. Ground control instructed a final series of altitude adjustments and approach coordinates. She repeated each aloud, micro-adjusting throttle and yoke as needed. The plane responded beautifully, the instruments aligning perfectly, the horizon clear, yet the suspense remained electric. Every passenger aware that the extraordinary feat they were witnessing was unfolding in real time. The pilots gradually offered subtle hand guidance, coordinating with her, she following instinctively yet maintaining control over every critical micro-adjustment. A flash of lightning briefly illuminated the clouds, revealing subtle shifts in wind direction. She reacted instantly, the plane tilting slightly one way, then another, micro-adjustments, stabilizing perfectly, the passengers gripping seats, their hearts hammering, the suspense rising higher with each passing second, the horizon approaching, now revealing the outline of the airstrip below and the final challenge looming. She adjusted flaps and throttle, precisely guiding the plane into the controlled descent. Minor tremors from wind gusts requiring tiny corrections. Each movement critical, the passengers silent, tense, almost holding their collective breath, the suspense thick as if time itself had slowed. The pilots now fully confident she had control, guided verbally offering advice, subtly. She absorbed and executed each adjustment, micro-correcting instantly. Runway came into view, the lights stretching ahead bright in the fading clouds, the plane gliding perfectly aligned. Her pulse raced, micro-adjusting yoke and throttle, every movement calculated perfectly. The cabin exhaled collectively, yet remained. Tense, the suspense electric, the final moments of landing approaching each second, a delicate balance of skill, instinct, and courage. The plane touched down smoothly, tires gripping tarmac, the small tremor absorbed by precise adjustments. Her hands stayed firm on the yoke, guiding it to a safe taxi speed. The passengers slowly exhaling, the suspense giving way to awe and relief. The pilots, now fully relieved, shook their heads in disbelief, watching the young passenger who had saved the flight, their expressions a mix of admiration and gratitude. As the plane taxied to the gate, she allowed the pilots to fully take over the controls, her hands releasing finally, yet her focus never breaking. The passengers clapped quietly, murmuring thanks. The tension releasing slowly, the suspense resolved, yet leaving a sense of exhilaration that would linger long after disembarking. The storm clouds receded behind them, the sun shining bright through the windows, a symbol of calm after extraordinary chaos. The ground crew met the aircraft and the passengers began to disembark, the pilots thanking her quietly, the passengers staring with awe at the girl who had guided them through potential disaster. The suspense of the flight finally dissolved, replaced by admiration, gratitude, and a profound awareness that courage can appear in the most unexpected places and in the smallest hands. The runway stretched out ahead, the tarmac glowing faintly in the morning light, the plane descending steadily, yet the tension in the cabin unbroken, her small hands firm on the yoke, every micro-adjustment critical as the engines hummed a steady rhythm beneath her fingers. The passengers leaned forward, eyes wide, some gripping armrests, others holding hands, the suspense thick enough to feel heavy as if each heartbeat echoed through the entire fuselage. She kept her gaze fixed on the horizon, instruments flickering subtly, the altitude and airspeed readings shifting slightly, demanding constant vigilance. The pilots, now fully alert, whispered guidance, soft instructions. She absorbed each calmly, micro-adjusting rudder, throttle, and yoke. The plane wobbled slightly, a gust of wind striking the wings. She reacted instantly, countering the movement, the aircraft leveling perfectly once more. The passengers gasped quietly, their tension mounting, the suspense coiling tighter around them as every second stretched impossibly long. The girl's mind cataloged each minor shift in air pressure, every subtle vibration of the fuselage, each flicker of instrument light, interpreting it all with instinctive precision. Ground control crackled faintly over the intercom, offering approach coordinates and minor course corrections. She repeated each aloud, confirming understanding before making the adjustments. The plane responded flawlessly, each micro-adjustment a testament to her instinctive skill. Yet the suspense remained electric, each breath taut with anticipation. The pilots watched silently, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. They had trained for years, yet could not imagine navigating such a situation with the composure this child displayed. The plane dipped slightly as a crosswind tugged it off center. She reacted immediately, tilting the yoke, correcting pitch and roll the aircraft, responding smoothly yet unpredictably. Her pulse raced, her fingers moving almost faster than thought as she guided the plane closer to the runway. The passengers leaned forward unconsciously, the suspense thick, their hearts hammering, the final moments approaching like a taut wire, ready to snap with each subtle gust of wind, each minor vibration of the plane. The runway lights grew clearer each second, the tarmac stretching long and bright below, the clouds thinning, revealing a pale blue sky above. She adjusted throttle and flaps, micro-adjusting for a perfect glide path, the engines humming steadily beneath her small but firm hands. The pilots began to coordinate, fully offering verbal guidance in tandem. She followed instinctively, yet remained the center of control, the suspense climbing higher with every microsecond. As the plane neared the threshold of landing, a sudden gust shifted the plane slightly to the left. She reacted instantly, countering with subtle rudder adjustment and slight yoke tilt, the aircraft leveling once more. The passengers exhaled slowly, yet remained tense. Each breath held the suspense now almost tangible as the runway drew ever closer, every second a decision point between a smooth landing and potential disaster. Her mind calculated instinctively every variable, every minor shift, in airspeed, altitude, and orientation as the plane descended toward safety. The landing gear indicator glowed, signaling readiness. She leaned forward, adjusting flaps slightly, ensuring perfect alignment, the plane responding precisely. The pilots whispered, Quietly guiding final minor corrections, she followed without hesitation. Every micro-adjustment a critical difference. The passengers gripped armrests or each other. The suspense now stretched taut, like a string vibrating with electricity every eye fixed on the cockpit, the horizon, and the unfolding miracle of a child landing an aircraft. The wheels touched down smoothly on the tarmac, a minor bump absorbed instantly by subtle throttle adjustment, the plane rolling perfectly aligned, the engines humming steadily, her hands still firm on the yoke guiding toward taxi speed. The passengers murmured quietly, exhaling relief, yet remaining tense, the suspense gradually dissolving, yet leaving awe and exhilaration in its wake. The pilots looked at her with disbelief, admiration, gratitude. A young girl had taken control and safely landed the plane. She released the yoke, finally allowing the pilots to fully assume control, yet her attention remained sharp every minor movement of the plane guided instinctively until taxiing was complete. The cabin erupted quietly in applause, murmurs of astonishment passing from passenger to passenger, whispers of awe and gratitude. The suspense had transformed into triumph, every person aboard, aware that they had witnessed an extraordinary feat of courage, skill, and composure beyond anything they could have imagined. Ground crew met the plane as it came to a complete stop, engines shutting down, the tension of the flight dissolving in the bright morning light. The pilots escorted her from the cockpit, the passengers turning to watch the child who had saved them, their faces reflecting disbelief, admiration, and gratitude. She walked slowly down the aisle, the eyes of every passenger, following her every step, the extraordinary reality of the moment settling around them like a quiet halo of awe and respect. The captain finally spoke quietly, yet with clear authority, praising her instinct, judgment, and courage, the co-pilot nodding silently beside him. The passengers murmured thanks, the crew offering smiles and quiet admiration, the extraordinary story unfolding around her, her small hands brushing against the yoke. One final time, the metal cool under her fingers. The plane, now silent, the adventure concluded, yet leaving an enduring echo of heroism and skill. As she stepped onto the tarmac, the morning sun illuminating her figure, the crew and passengers gathered around, applauding softly, their faces full of awe. The pilots shook her hand quietly, offering thanks. The passengers leaning forward, taking in the reality of what had occurred. The plane behind them stood idle, yet alive in memory, the engines cooling. The storm passed, yet the suspense and tension of the flight, now resolved in triumph, the extraordinary act of courage and instinct remembered by all present. News cameras already waiting captured the faces of passengers and crew, murmurs of astonishment spreading quickly the story of the young passenger who had guided the aircraft through potential disaster, spreading across headlines and social media. The girl remained composed, her eyes bright yet calm, the memory of the tense flight still vivid in her mind, yet tempered by the realization that she had done what few could imagine, doing the suspense and fear transformed now into admiration, awe, and lasting respect. The pilots escorted her to meet the passengers who offered quiet congratulations, each gesture filled with gratitude and disbelief. The plane stood behind them, a silent monument to the extraordinary event, each person aware that they had witnessed something beyond ordinary comprehension. The girl smiled slightly, acknowledging the passengers quietly, the memory of her hands on the yoke guiding the plane through turbulence and crisis, a story that would be retold for years, leaving suspense and heroism entwined. As the passengers disembarked fully, the crew following her example, the sun bright in the sky casting reflections. Across the tarmac, the extraordinary flight became a legend in quiet form, the suspense and danger now replaced with reflection and admiration. The girl in row 17 walked slowly toward the exit, her small figure leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed the ordeal, the story of courage, instinct, and composure echoing in every mind, present the flight completed, yet unforgettable. Even as the plane doors closed and the engines powered down, the memory of her calm hands, guiding 30,000 feet of aircraft through potential catastrophe, lingered, the passengers recounting the story to themselves, the crew speaking quietly of her instinct and precision, the extraordinary heroism of a 12-year-old passenger, now etched in history, leaving suspense and awe intertwined as a quiet reminder of the impossible made possible through courage, instinct, and unwavering focus. The pilots stood quietly watching her leave the cabin, their expressions a mixture of disbelief, awe, and gratitude, the extraordinary events of the flight settling into memory, yet impossible to forget. The passengers turned back slowly, taking in the aircraft. Now calm, engines silent, the morning light reflecting off the fuselage, a symbol of survival, triumph, and courage. The suspense that had gripped them hours before now transformed into a story of remarkable skill and bravery that would linger in their minds for a lifetime. The girl finally stepped off the plane. The bright morning, sun warming her face, the crew and passengers surrounding her in quiet admiration. Each movement reflected composure and quiet pride, the extraordinary reality of her actions now fully realized. The story of the passenger who became the hero of the flight, ready to be told and retold, leaving suspense and tension behind, replaced by awe, inspiration, and a sense of wonder at what courage and instinct can accomplish in the most unexpected moments.